Describe what Alliance does. How much is coal? How much is natural gas and oil at this point?
We produce coal. We're the second largest producer in the eastern United States. We also own significant oil and gas minerals that we lease to the E&P companies. We're primarily, our profits are probably 80% coal and 20% related to the oil and gas segment.
Joe, the all-in notion of supplying energy and energy independence, does it still include coal? And can you include coal? And does it need to be clean coal? Is it still part of the equation? Because, I mean, we've heard politicians running for president say, I'm going to put the coal industry out of business completely. So that's the backdrop that you're dealing with right now, isn't it?
That's correct, Joe. In the energy crisis back in the 70s, the nation turned to coal. This time with the energy crisis, you've heard a lot about increasing oil and gas production. You've heard about policies trying to ship natural gas or LNG to Europe, but you don't hear anybody on the federal policy arena talk about coal. And that's a major mistake, because coal is the one reliable, resilient power source we have in this country. And we need to continue to depend on coal.
Talk about the composition of the coal that you do produce. How much of it is what we think of as clean coal? And would it make more sense to replace the coal that's being used now with natural gas? Can that be done to power the grid, or are we going to be using coal for years into the future?
Well, specifically on whether it's clean coal or coal, I mean, all the coal that we sell into the thermal plants are going to plants that are totally compliant with all environmental laws today. And I think one of the major misconceptions on emissions, when people want to look at the emissions, they when you think about trying to replace a coal-fired generator, what are you going to replace it with? You're going to replace it with either renewables, which require natural gas as a backup. So that's 3 different energy sources. What we're talking about is just protecting the fleet, where power plants have already been invested in, no new investment, no new energy activity. Instead, we've got an administration that is passing rules that are threatening 25% of our coal fleets in 2023. There's a specific regulation dealing with coal ash, which is basically the storage of a coal byproduct after the power plant burns the coal to generate electricity. Under the Obama administration, they passed a rule complying a different technique to store that ash by 2023. Unfortunately, the backup power has not been there to allow those coal plants to close. So we have roughly 55 different power plants that are currently trying to get an extension on that timeline because they're really concerned about an energy security issue next year. When you think about emissions just from those coal plants they're trying to close, you're trying to replace that with not only new capacity for solar, wind, and natural gas, but also the infrastructure for that. That means pipelines and transmission lines. You can't convince me that when you capture all the emissions from all 3 of those industries, plus transportation and pipeline, that they're greater than the existing power plants they're trying to close.